Hello, everybody. You're listening to AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. That's me. Thank you for joining me today, giving me just a little slice of your day. You know that I appreciate you. We do this here, Tango, every Monday to Friday, 6 to 7. This is a sports show, though sometimes I do take off the beaten path. Today, we're talking about the NFL draft. That was yesterday, and mostly Laramie Tunsil. I'm sure you've all heard by now the wild and crazy story about him. Just moments before the draft, the bong mask Instagram video was released of him, and it spawned basically a night-long draft drama that has never been seen in the history of the draft. We've had draft drama, but I don't think we've ever had it to this degree, this strongly. So we're going to talk about all of that because everybody lost last night, I think, with the exception of the NFL. Of course, because whenever there's a scandal, the only person to win is the NFL. They come out on top in all of these situations, always. They're the only ones that get to win. So, before we jump into all of that, let me talk about the platforms. Where can we reach you, and where can you reach us? This is not a one-way street. It's not just me talking to you. You get to talk back. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Search Hot News Talk Radio. We're the first thing that comes up. Make sure to check us out on hotnewstalkradio.com. You can get access to all of our social media pages from there as well. And you can stream all of our shows 24/7, 365. And we're on YouTube as well. All of our stuff, our local shows, streamed daily. You understand? Daily. Everything. So you can check us out there as well as leave a comment, subscribe to our channel, and you'll always have updates of any and all local shows coming out, which I am a huge fan of. And you can also check us out in the TuneIn Radio app, in your favorite app store on whatever mobile device you use. Simply search Hot News Talk Radio in the app. It's completely free. Give us a favorite and press play, and you'll have Hot News Talk Radio everywhere you go. Very interested in talking about the draft. I will probably rehash a lot of things here for you if you have not as yet heard. Laramie Tunsil, who was considered the top prospect from Ole Miss, the University of Ole Miss, entering the NFL draft. He was basically originally projected to be the number 1 overall pick to the Titans. The Titans trade out of that. And then the next pick, the Browns trade away as well. The Browns could have taken a Laramie Tunsil and used that to beef up their offensive line because they are changing a lot of things. And I think a lot of people believe Laramie Tunsil is a good enough player to be great. I mean, like in the long run of Laramie Tunsil's career, it would not be the most shocking thing to look back on his career and go, that guy's a Hall of Famer. That guy could easily be a Hall of Famer. He's a very, very talented player. And he's got the size, he's got the strength, he's got the speed to play that position. Okay, the Dolphins got a steal at 13. He fell all the way to 13 in the draft. But when you have character concerns, it's very easy to separate yourself from a person and say, you know what, I don't want to deal with any and all of that. I don't want to deal with the bad press and bad PR, even though that's a short-term consequence. I don't want to deal with this person's terrible decision-making. But here's the thing. Laramie Tunsil, the bong mask, as Laramie Tunsil would tell you, that happened ages ago. And this video came out on his Instagram account while he was at the draft, moments before the draft. And I have trouble believing that Laramie Tunsil would himself release that video right before the draft. So when he says he got hacked, it might be, for the first time in the history of sports, an actual hacking. This is not like when Kurt Rambis, who was the head coach of the Knicks last season, I don't know if they're going to rehire him or what the Knicks are going to do, but Kurt Rambis, his Twitter account was liking different pornographic Twitter accounts. It's not quite like that, where then he said he got hacked. I don't believe you, because you were increasingly liking these accounts over the course of you having a Twitter account. That what it seems like is that you just didn't know that people could see that because you're not a digital native. You didn't grow up using this technology, and I'm not here to shame you for that, but then don't say you got hacked. You just didn't know. You just didn't know. That's different. I don't believe that Kurt Rambis got hacked or any of the other things where players have said terrible things on the internet and then later apologized and said they got hacked. Okay? It's ridiculous. Laramie Tunsil may actually have been hacked because there's no reason to sabotage yourself mere moments before the draft. And he lost a lot of money. I believe on the Drudge Report, the quote was that was a $15 million bong hit, which is funny. And also very true. You lost a lot of money there, falling all the way to number 13 of the Dolphins. And I think here's the thing. If that weren't enough, right? If the drama of the bong mask weren't enough, Laramie Tunsil then has pictures of his texts with coaches asking the coaches for money to pay his rent and pay his mom's rent or pay her electric bill. So now that story comes out, and that has multiple ramifications. One being Laramie Tunsil was receiving money from his coaches. And two being that there was clearly an agreement or a setup to, if you need the money, if you need this kind of cash for any reason, especially a legitimate reason like help with rent, talk to your coaches about it. Talk to the coaches about it. And it's pretty crazy because there's been suspicion about Ole Miss. Ole Miss got to be a very good football school in the SEC very quickly. And I've heard the speculation and the rumors around them for a while. None of it was you could substantiate. All of it was just, boy, they seem to be recruiting very well all of a sudden. Why is it that players that previously didn't have any interest in going to Ole Miss suddenly feel like going to Ole Miss? How are they so good so fast? And Laramie Tunsil shocked the world by not only having these things appear on his social media, he shocked the world by admitting that these things were true. That he in the post-draft press conference with him that he was talking, he was being basically hounded by a reporter about it. One reporter was asking him, like, did coaches ever give you money to help with rent or help with it? And he just said, I don't want to talk about it, which I think is the right and wise answer there. He said that originally, that he didn't want to talk about it. The reporter just kept asking him the question and wording it slightly differently over and over again until he said, you know what, I think that would have to be true. And that looks bad. And the only thing that looks worse is his PR woman running up onto the screen to end the interview and pull Laramie Tunsil away. She's late by a good minute and a half. Like, the damage has just been done already. Now this looks worse and overreactionary. So then Laramie Tunsil is a guy that he's not only had shots at his own character taken, but now the NCAA is going to have to investigate Ole Miss, you would think, for basically allegations against them. That they were paying at least one of their great players. The things could not have gone worse for Ole Miss if you had conspired to topple Ole Miss. Like, if you had planned their downfall, things could not have gone worse. Their huge thing was they wanted three of their players to be, top 10 draft picks. And they had Laramie Tunsil, they had Laquan Treadwell last night, who went later in the draft because nothing personal. He just ran slower at the NFL draft combine than we thought he was going to. He's just not very fast. And I think that scared a lot of people away. Like, nobody wants a receiver that can't move quickly. I think he'll be a very effective receiver and certainly underrated in the draft. But if you can't move quickly as a wide receiver in the NFL, like, people are going to be scared of that prospect that you just can't separate from some of the best defensive backs in the league. That's just how that is. And you had all of these players dropping in the draft. Robert Kimdichie obviously scares people away because he just comes off as a crazy person. like in the draft, his draft interview last night, Robert Kimdichie could not have come off any more unhinged and lacking in self-awareness if he had completely tried. Like, the reason why people passed on Robert Kimdichie was he had that whole situation where he tried not to get caught with synthetic weed. He ended up falling out of a 4th-story window. And the story around that whole story, I cannot even properly report because it's vague and weird and sketchy, and I don't want to get anything wrong. But how you end up falling out of a 4th-story window while police are trying to search your room for weed, there's something weird that happened there. Something very odd happened there, and teams are rightfully scared away. And Robert Kimdichie is standing there talking about how the teams that passed up on him are going to be sorry and all of those things. Like, no, Robert, like you put yourself in a position that, and talking about owning a Panther for no reason, that teams are just worried about the decisions that you'll make when they hand you millions of dollars. I don't think it's wrong for teams to worry about life skills. And I listened to the radio today, and it's interesting because we flip-flop on this all the time in the media, especially in the sports media. We're possibly the worst about this. We're looking so hard to take the most interesting angle on a story, to take the most extreme angle on a story, that we say things that we wouldn't normally say. For instance, you've got Todd McShay last night saying that Laramie Tunsil sold out Ole Miss. He shouldn't have sold out Ole Miss. He shouldn't have told the truth and sold out Ole Miss. That you have to question his judgment there and his maturity, because he told the truth instead of be silent or I guess also lie is an option there. And when it comes down to young athletes, young individuals, we seem to never side with the individual. We always side with the giant entity that's paying them, which is weird because we don't do that in anything else. That's the reason why unions exist. We side with the little guy. Usually we root for the underdog. In the story of David and Goliath, David is the good guy. It'd be weird if suddenly you just started rooting for Goliath. But that's what happens. You have Laramie Tunsil in a situation where the school did something wrong by offering to pay his rent, and Laramie Tunsil telling the truth, we're coming down on him. He's the little guy here. Do you know how much money Ole Miss makes? Do you know how much money Ole Miss made off of Laramie Tunsil and Robert Kimdichie and Laquan Treadwell while they were not being paid? So it's strange to suddenly come down on those guys for decisions that they have made or are making. They're young. They're not making great decisions, but they're very young. They can always grow up, and they're individuals. Relative to Ole Miss, Laramie Tunsil is pretty powerless. How did we get to this point where we're suddenly rooting for Goliath? We're rooting for Ole Miss over Laramie Tunsil, who was not necessarily put in a position to succeed there, because it's draft day, right? And this is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. Just giving a recap of the draft because there is so much to talk about, and most of it is Laramie Tunsil and Ole Miss. But the draft in Laramie Tunsil's rather unique situation was not put in a position to succeed if he's in a situation where he can't make his rent and the school has offered to pay his rent and pay his mom's rent, which is giving improper benefits, which is against the NCAA rules. I don't have a problem with them looking out for a guy, but there are multiple resources that he can go through to get his rent paid if he's not able to make his rent. The Catholic Church has a number of programs where they help with that. United Way has a program where they help with that. They could have directed him to any of those resources. They chose not to because they already had a system in place. It appears to me, just my opinion, that there was already a system in place where if you were having trouble with this, you could just text the coach and let him know. Things that were stupid that happened, the school actually paid, that they actually responded to this via text. the entire conversation about how much money do you need happened via text. The other stupid thing that happened is, and I'm not sure why he would do this, but there are screenshots of that text. Laramie Tunsil took a screenshot of the text and it got posted on social media. And I believe that he was hacked. It could be that someone tried to extort him. He said no, and the threat was gone through with. Like, if you don't pay up, this is what's going to happen to you. And the person did it. That would make a lot of sense. Because I don't see any good reason why Laramie Tunsil would do that to himself the night before the draft. Guys have done stupid things to themselves previously. Just not the night before the draft, right? We live in a world where Plexico Burress once shot himself in the leg in a nightclub with an unregistered Glock. Like, if we live in that same world. So it's not like guys haven't done stupid things to themselves before. But the night before you're about to make millions typically is not the night for that. And then to continue down the Laramie Tunsil rabbit hole, because it's such a complex and nuanced and particularly deep rabbit hole. The Miami Dolphins had scheduled a press conference to introduce Laramie Tunsil to the team, as teams do the day after you draft a guy. And Laramie Tunsil was apparently with team doctors. This is according to the Miami Dolphins, who I think are telling a rather tall tale here. I think because the next day he can't go to his own press conference because he's got an allergic reaction to something. And they're trying to figure out what it is. They don't know what it is, but they're trying to figure out what it is. So they had the press conference for one Laramie Tunsil, sans Laramie Tunsil. And it's weird. That whole thing is strange. If you wanted Laramie Tunsil out of the news cycle, what you could do is wait until the entire NFL draft is finished, because it is a 3-day affair. You could wait until the entire NFL draft is finished and instead have him come up later with the rest of the draft picks. Then you dilute the need to ask Laramie Tunsil a bunch of questions by having a number of other draft picks up there. Instead, you come up with this story that appears bogus. Even if it's true, it appears bogus. Nobody believes that Laramie Tunsil was magically just allergic the day after he was the biggest story in the draft for reasons outside of the draft. Nobody's going to buy that. Why not just have him show up with the rest of your draft picks like Monday morning? You have the whole weekend. We could forget about it. The news cycle will forget about it. And it's worse because the news cycle, at least in Miami, had already put Laramie Tunsil on page 2, because today, D. Gordon, who used to be with the Lookouts, got hit with a steroid suspension, and he's been suspended for 80 games. Fully paid for all 80 games, by the way. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But D. Gordon knocked Laramie Tunsil and the Miami Dolphins to page 2. So the allergy story puts you back in the news cycle. It's just a weird way to go about doing that. And it doesn't seem particularly effective. Obviously, it hasn't worked, because now we're still talking about it. And that's another piece of the story that we get to talk about. Like, we didn't even get to talk about the fact that, like, Robert Kimdichie is still weird. He's going to the Arizona Cardinals. I think that's a good place for him to go. That particular organization is no nonsense. The guys inside of that organization are really good at self-enforcing. Like, the players on that team. They have Tyrann Mathieu, who's a guy who's made mistakes in his past and hasn't made any more mistakes since, at least not that we're aware of. So that's a guy that you could see in the locker room being a Kimdichie mentor, and you think that he's going to do well there. But just the interview after he got drafted, just showing a complete lack of awareness about anything that he has done. And why is it that teams would be skeptical of a guy that wants to buy Black Panther? Just with the money that he's going to make. And then you add on top of that, Robert Kimdichie. It's not like Robert Kimdichie has had perfect tape. I think people act like Robert Kimdichie was just going to be the greatest thing. He was going to be a great defensive player, probably rated the best before all of the things happened in the draft. But teams being afraid of guys with character issues, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I've heard words tossed around like cowardice and how afraid teams are of this guy and that guy. It's like, yeah, you're making an investment in a person. You want to make sure they're going to make decisions that will allow them to continue playing football. Okay, you can't have a guy suspended for 8 games when you're trying to make a playoff push. It's not going to work for you. You're listening to AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose, and we'll get a little bit more into the D. Gordon suspension and a little bit more NFL draft talk next.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing a new show. I want guys who push it to the middle of the table and go over the top. Take a risk, fail miserably. I'm right, and I'm not wrong, and I'll never back down. Conflict works. Allow it.
It's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Right here and everywhere. Noon Eastern.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds. We'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Finding just the right place to live can be a daunting task. Stop your search. In Chattanooga, the place to live is Cross Creek Villas for under $1,000 and available for immediate move-in. You can enjoy this 2-bedroom split layout, over 1,000 square feet, 9-foot ceilings, an extra-large patio or balcony. And don't forget to ask about their preferred employer program. Cross Creek Villas is a gated community, offering a 24-hour fitness facility, a beautiful pool and hot tub, and Cross Creek Villas is pet-friendly. Stroll the pet park with your best friend and enjoy the free use of their business center and clubhouse. Plus, if you mention you heard this on the radio, your application fee is free. Cross Creek Villas, close to downtown off of Highway 58. Go to crosscreekchattanooga.com. That's crosscreekchattanooga.com or call 894-0446. That's 894-0446. Redefine the way you live at Cross Creek Villas. Go to crosscreekchattanooga.com or call 894-0446. Cross Creek Villas.
Just imagine not a cloud in the sky. It's the perfect day on the water. You could be enjoying boating with friends or wetting your line to catch a fish. Or maybe it's just you and that special someone on a sunset cruise. All of this without the hassle of owning a boat with your membership in the Carefree Boat Club. As you relax and spend time with the ones you care about, you have the peace of mind of knowing you're a member of the Carefree Boat Club. Weekends were made for relaxing and being hassle-free, just like the Carefree Boat Club. Let us take the worry out of boat ownership. No matter if you enjoy fishing, skiing, cruising the lake, or maybe even an overnight adventure, we have a boat for you at the Carefree Boat Club. Start making memories today. Call 423-619-7156 to join. Boating season is here, so do not wait. Call now, 423-619-7156. Carefree Boat Club is located at the Harbor Lights Marina, 9718 Hickson Pike.
Rick Davis Golden Diamonds has got on his sunglasses. He's buying so many glittering diamonds today, he's almost going blind looking at the haul. Rick Davis Golden Diamonds, come on in today. He'll give you top dollar on a sparkling field of diamonds, an ocean of value that he wants to convert into cash for you. Come on in today, sell your diamonds. You'll get the biggest wad of dollars anywhere for your gleaming diamond. Rick Diamonds Golden Diamonds. Rick wants to meet you in person today. Diamonds, Rick loves them. He'll take your diamonds and gold and you'll walk out with ready-made money in your pocket. Hundreds, 50s, 20s, and $10 bills. Cash, cash, cash. At Rick Davis Golden Diamonds. Rick Davis, Brainerd Road near Eastgate Town Center. Cash, 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 and more cash.
Expect increasing clouds through the nighttime hours. Could see a brief passing shower or two. Overnight lows 60 to 62. Now for your weekend, expect mostly cloudy skies, warm and humid with scattered showers, but not too bad, with high temperatures through Sunday, 80 to 82. For lunch or dinner, come to Guthrie's, home of the original golden fried delicious chicken finger with their special world-famous sauce. Open daily. Locations in Trenton, Signal Mountain, and Ringgold. Go get Guthrie's. It's always good. And I'm Sourcine 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Hoare.
On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
When the weather turns bad, turn to AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. On the net, hotnewstalkradio.com. Follow us on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. From the Hot News Talk Radio Weather Center. Chattanooga, we've got you covered. When the weather turns bad, the Tennessee Valley turns to Hot News Talk Radio.
Go, 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 go.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio with your Hot News Now update. A boat burst into flames at the Gold Point Marina in Hamilton County. According to the Sheriff's Department, 6 people were on board. They've all been evacuated and are now safe. It's unclear what started the fire on that boat. Bradley County Sheriff Eric Watson was assaulted and hospitalized when he tried to intervene in a domestic assault case. The defendant is Gregory Mathis, who's 23. He has a lengthy history of assaults. His latest incident occurred on Monday when he was charged with aggravated assault and he was released on $20,000 appearance bond. Before that, he was charged with domestic assault on January the 29th. He's now been arrested again. A manhunt began at the Chickamauga battlefield for a man who crashed a car after a high-speed chase at 1:15 a.m. this morning. The GBI is on scene along with a number of other law enforcement officials trying to find the individual. A shotgun and a handgun were retrieved from his vehicle. And federal judge Harold Murphy, in a 90-page opinion, determined that Hutchinson Medical Center and its trustees owe Erlanger over $36 million. If it's going on in the Tennessee Valley, it's going on Hot News Talk Radio.
Hot News Talk 1240.
We could do the whole thing where we go down all the winners and losers of the NFL draft. That bores me out of my skull, though. I don't like any of that stuff. Like, just the winners and losers. How do we know? Seriously, like, the draft is hilarious in retrospect. When you look back on previous drafts, guys that we thought were a lock turned out to be a bust. Guys who turned out to be a bust are guys that if you had to redo the draft, you'd take them first instead of where they actually got taken. Like, you see guys like J.J. Watt. I don't think anybody saw what J.J. Watt actually became coming around the horizon, nor do I think anybody saw what Jamarcus Russell became coming around the horizon either. You go even further back, we take Peyton Manning for granted. Peyton Manning was compared to Ryan Leaf, and the two of them were the number 1 and number 2 consensus picks, like to the point where if the Indianapolis Colts had taken Ryan Leaf number 1 overall instead of Peyton Manning, nobody would have been surprised. Nobody would have thought that was a bad idea back then. Obviously, that whole Ryan Leaf situation turned out to not work. So in retrospect, that looks hilarious. Like, the entire idea that Ryan Leaf was ever considered, great. It's hilarious. And I'm on the CBS Sports app. It's a fantastic sports app. It's the one that I use most often for any and all information and sports scores. And they did this thing where they had the draft board and they would grade the draft picks instantly. Like, you would see a team draft and first as the Eagles take Carson Wentz, they got a C-. How do you know that that's a C- pick? They don't have a quarterback. Sam Bradford is not a long-term option. Like, sure, we're not sure how good Carson Wentz can actually be, and his rise to prominence and being considered a good quarterback is particularly meteoric in a way that's a little worrying. But, I mean, at the same time, if the Eagles thought that was their guy and he turns out to work out, what's the problem? Like, that's a pick that in retrospect, that could end up being an A. Why? Why would that ever be an issue that you would have? You don't know how good he's going to be as of today. Like, these instantaneous draft grades are the worst thing that's happened to the NFL draft. Like, people are just so hungry for draft analysis. We'll take it even if it doesn't make sense. We will take draft analysis even though it makes no sense to be able to grade somebody's draft the instant that they make a draft pick. Nonsense. You know, I look at the Jamarcus Russell draft, possibly more so than any other draft, because the players that the Raiders ended up not drafting, they turned out to be great players, almost all of them. It's pretty scary how many players went in that draft that the Raiders could have had Okay, Jamarcus Russell was the number 1 overall pick in that draft, went to the Raiders. The very next pick, Calvin Johnson, Detroit Lions. The very next pick, Joe Thomas, Cleveland Browns. The very next pick, Gain Adams, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Levi Brown, Arizona Cardinals. LaRon Landry, Washington Redskins. Adrian Peterson, Minnesota Vikings. Other players that were in the first round of this draft that turned out to be great. Patrick Willis, Marshawn Lynch. Adam Carricker was all right. Darrelle Revis. There was a ton of talent in this draft. Brandon Merriweather, Joe Staley, Paul Posluszny. All of these players turned out to be really fantastic players in their own rights. And there's many of them are still in the league today, and the ones that aren't in the league retired. Calvin Johnson just retired. The damage to his knees was too much for him. He retired. But not after he gave Detroit 9 fantastic seasons and 1 playoff appearance. I mean, along with Matt Stafford, too. Because the years where there was no quarterback up there, that was rough. Okay, Adrian Peterson, who a lot of people thought you could have argued to take him number 1 overall, but the prevailing idea of not taking running backs number 1 anymore, that's where we're at. And it's pretty ridiculous when you look back on it. Like all drafts are silly when you look back on it. Okay, the 2007 NFL draft is particularly hilarious when you look back on it. But like drafts even 2-3 years ago, right? Like let's take a look back at the 2014 NFL draft and see if there aren't some draft picks that if you look at them, they're not a little silly now. Because there has to be a few, right? Number 1 pick, the Houston Texans select Jadeveon Clowney. This is from the 2014 NFL draft, just 2 years ago. The Rams take Greg Robinson. They might want to redo that one. Greg Robinson's been all right. He's just been okay. The Jags take Blake Bortles. Well, I mean, the Rams could have taken a Blake Bortles because certainly what they've got on the roster now is just a hot mess. Like they don't have anything on that roster that looks anywhere near good. So like this idea that you need to instantly grade even the next day, like the winners and losers of the draft. Like we know who's going to be good and we don't know who's going to be good. We have no idea. I do have some winners and losers of the draft, but this isn't like in a draft grade kind of way. I think the Browns are winners in the draft because they took their number 2 pick. They got a couple of number 1 picks. They've got a couple of number 2 picks. And they got 3 number 3 picks, three third rounders. They've taken their picks and multiplied them into 11 more picks. That's winning. Like, because the odds of you selecting a player that's going to be fantastic, you have increased those odds exponentially. So, I mean, that's winning the draft to me. Like looking at the guy that you drafted, I don't know if you won that pick or not. Let's look at the guy's career in 3 to 4 years and see how he's contributing to the team that he's on. Because some guys are perfectly talented and they just underachieve. Well, then you didn't win that draft pick. Like if Robert Kimdichie isn't any good, it's going to be because he underachieved. It's not because he doesn't have all the physical tools in the world. But we don't know for a fact that Robert Kimdichie is going to be a Hall of Famer. We have no idea. He's got all the physical abilities to do so, but we don't know that he will actually become a Hall of Famer. Like judging the draft as it happens or the next day or even the next week is a pointless endeavor. But with that said, one person who seems to always be winning the draft is Roger Goodell. Roger Goodell is winning the draft because I'm standing here and talking about Laramie Tunsil, and everybody in this town is talking about Laramie Tunsil. That's been the news of the day. Everybody is talking about a left tackle from Ole Miss. If this does not buck the trend of sports stories, that we're talking about an offensive lineman from Mississippi. nationally, on the national level, people are doing this. It's because it's such a huge story. And we're covering this so much that it's, again, turning into one of these situations where any publicity is good publicity if you're the NFL. Roger Goodell was being interviewed, and he had the Roger Goodell thing that he does where he says things, and I don't know if there's a way that some of these things could sound worse. But Roger Goodell was being interviewed on ESPN and about what he thought about the Laramie Tunsil situation, on this whole story and how it broke out and what that means for the NFL draft and for the league. And his answer to that question was, I think it's part of what makes the draft so exciting. Wait a minute. A player, before entering the league, violated the rules of the organization he was previously with and the organization that he is soon to be with photographic evidence, unwisely posted on social media, whether or not he was hacked. And this is exciting to you because it generates a story. And it gets more people to pay attention to the gigantic reality TV program that is the NFL. This story, we're constantly talking about this. The stories that are good for the NFL are actually the stories that are bad for the NFL. Any story that you think would be not worth reporting on in the NFL, the stories that you think, oh, this is a PR nightmare for the league, they don't want this, they actually do. The only story that the NFL doesn't want to have to keep talking about are concussions, because that's saying that watching football is wrong. The other stuff is saying a specific person is wrong, a specific player is wrong. And so we can demonize and criminalize the Patriots and Tom Brady for Deflategate because it draws more eyes to the league when there is a part of the season where there isn't football being played. There's no football being played, and people will talk about it because there's nothing else to talk about. So people are going to talk about this Laramie Tunsil story, which is by all accounts not a great story. Because if Laramie Tunsil posted those images and videos on Instagram and Twitter, he's a knucklehead at best and completely out of his mind at worst. And there's an even worse scenario than that, which is that if somebody else did that, if somebody else hacked Laramie Tunsil and posted those things on his account in an attempt to assassinate his character, in an attempt to extort him, whatever the case is, all of these things are illegal. If the person who hacked Laramie Tunsil is a person that he knows, that knows his password, that person can see up to 5 years in prison. That's a crime. Not what makes the draft so exciting. And Laramie Tunsil losing a ton of money as a result of a combination of his bad decisions and then somebody else's ill intentions, that doesn't make the draft exciting. That's just sad and depressing. Except I'm standing here talking about it, and we've been hearing the story all day, and it's the top story on ESPN, and it's the top story on Fox Sports, and it's the top story on CBS Sports, and it's the top story on NBC Sports. It's just the top story on like every sporting network. It's on the top story on Sporting News Radio. Everywhere. It's the top story everywhere. Which is insane. But at the same time, it helps us to continue talking about the NFL. I don't think that Roger Goodell is hurting over this. It doesn't make the league look bad. And what other organization and what other sport can you think of where this does not make them look bad? Steroid talk doesn't make them look bad. It doesn't. When we talk about steroids in the NFL, like even that cannot derail the NFL. Like Al Jazeera did this thing where they accused Peyton Manning of taking steroids. The league investigated it. Other news sources investigated it. Whatever happened to that investigation? We never heard the conclusion of that investigation. Steroids cannot derail football in the NFL. Cannot do it. Right? Like baseball, the moment we hear a story like D. Gordon is hit with an 80-game performance-enhancing drug suspension, the moment we hear that story, we're afraid for baseball because baseball went through that entire nightmare. And by the way, they've gotten the number of guys getting caught taking performance-enhancing drugs in baseball is way down. People don't really get caught anymore because nobody wants to be suspended. Nobody wants to lose playing time. And, guys, especially the guys looking to try and build a legacy and make it to the Hall of Fame, you get that steroid asterisk next to your name, and that's it for you. But we see a guy like D. Gordon hit with performance-enhancing drug suspension, and immediately you start to worry about baseball. Like, hopefully, where they're not regressing. They aren't, but like you hope not. You think about them a little bit and you worry. You cannot derail football in that same way. Only concussions can derail football, and the league has done possibly the most brilliant PR job on making sure that's not a thing that we talk about very often. We talk about it, sort of. But when there's an opportunity to really talk about it, the NFL is in there to say, shh, nope. PBS was going to team up with ESPN's Outside the Lines. It was going to be a frontline and outside the lines special report on NFL concussions, on the concussion crisis. And then all of a sudden, ESPN and Outside the Lines backs away because the league showed up and said, no, you can't talk about this. You're not allowed. And ESPN, with their gigantic conflict of interest as a media outlet, having NFL games on their network, just bowed down to the NFL and said, okay. Then you look at the movie Concussion, which is another opportunity to have this serious conversation about brain trauma and the league. And in order to use actual NFL logos in the movie to legitimize the story, you've got to partner with the NFL. And there were things that the NFL wanted taken out of the story, which is crazy because what they allowed is still pretty damning. But the stuff that they decided to take out of the story, I think softens it. Story doesn't have any teeth anymore. It's the only thing that can stop the league, and they do a really good job of making sure we don't get to talk about it. So then you have a guy who loses $15 million and almost derails the beginning of his NFL career because there's a video of him with a bong gas mask on. And Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the league, is like, yeah, this makes it more exciting. Seriously? I mean, gee whiz. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose. That's me. Thank you for joining me today, giving me just a little slice of your time. You know that I appreciate you. I'd like to talk about the platforms. Where can you reach us and where can we reach you? I highly recommend Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, the greatest of the social media sites out there. Highly interactive. This is not a one-way street. Radio is not for us anyway. And you can check us out on hotnewstalkradio.com, where we stream all of our programming. Colin Cowherd, Sean Hannity, and this show, Clutch with Keon Rose, here on AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. We stream 24/7, 365, and you can get to all of our social media sites from hotnewstalkradio.com. You can also check us out in the TuneIn Radio app in your favorite app store. Simply search Hot News Talk Radio in the free mobile app. Give us a favorite and press play, and you'll have Hot News Talk Radio everywhere you go. So there are no excuses, I've got to say. You know, I've got an interesting thing to talk about here because the draft was interesting for a number of reasons. You had John Gruden and Mel Kiper discussing the draft and breaking it down. Mel Kiper's been, on the draft for 30-something years, almost 40 years now, just breaking down draft stuff on draft day. And John Gruden hasn't been doing this for nearly as long. But I will say that there's probably nobody more consistent in the sports media than John Gruden, because there is nobody that John Gruden hates. John Gruden is possibly the least critical person in the sports media ever. And it is, at first it used to annoy me. Like, why won't he criticize anybody or make fun of anybody or talk about their weaknesses, because they are a player that definitely has weaknesses? And John Gruden is so hell-bent on not burning any bridges, he will say absolutely nothing. It's either overwhelmingly positive or nothing with him. Okay? And which is weird, because John Gruden was known for being a hard-nosed NFL coach. You mean to tell me you can't think of one bad thing that this guy does that was drafted here? John Gruden likes everybody's draft pick for everybody. I really like that they took a receiver right here. And I like the receiver. You just have no criticism of this guy whatsoever. None. Okay. Cool. What am I watching draft coverage for? I don't have time to sit down and watch all of these guys play football. Okay, I'll admit, I pretty much just watched the SEC and Big 12 because those are the teams that I like, and they're all there. And then every now and then I watch some Big 10, and every now and then I watch some Pac-12, but mostly I watch two conferences play football. I watched a lot of Clemson football this year, but that's about it. I don't watch a ton of teams play college football because there's a million teams. I don't have time to sit down and watch everybody. That's your job, which means I don't really care to know just what it is that a guy does well. Is this guy good at playing football? And I don't know, because John Gruden only tells me the good stuff. You walk away from the draft listening to John Gruden, you think everybody can play. You're just shocked that some guys are out of the league in 3 years because you didn't know they had weaknesses. Just according to John Gruden, nobody stinks. You've got to be critical sometimes. I don't do a perfect show every single day. If I ask somebody, how did I do? Don't just tell me that I stink, but also don't make it seem like every show I've done is the greatest show that's ever been created. It's not true. I'm a realist. I understand this. That's one thing in the draft. Then the other thing in the draft is that Chris Berman kept on insisting that never before has 3 players from one school been taken in the top 10 of the draft, which would be a really cool fact if it were true. It's not true. And Chris Berman was just saying stuff that it's happened numerous times. Just how on earth do you do this in your coverage? They give you just in a pre-production meeting. And I've been fortunate enough to be in a few television pre-production meetings. You run down all of the stats and all of the data that you're going to need. If it's not on that paper, don't say that. Don't make up statistics. That doesn't make any sense. So that too is very preposterous. But the most preposterous thing about the NFL draft last night was Ezekiel Elliott deciding that the entire world needed to see his abs. And before you jump into, boy, Keon, you just sound jealous. I am not jealous of Ezekiel Elliott's abs. They're great abs. If I had abs like that, I would show them off. I just wouldn't wear half a shirt on draft day. This is basically you being hired. And you wore half of your shirt. That's insanity. That is insanity. I don't care how great your abs look. This is the day that you're being hired to your new job. Can you wear the rest of your shirt, please? If you could do that, that'd be great. Thanks. This is AM 1240 Odd News Talk Radio. You've been listening to Clutch with Keon Rose. Thank you for joining me today and giving me just a little slice of your time. Remember, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And I'll see you next hour. I'll be joined by Russell Stroud with We've got a special show just for you guys.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News.